I'm going to start here with probably the kind of traditional journalist question right now, which is, you know, you made significant gains last week at the local elections. A poll out last night put you on round about 51%. You're kind of on track to be Prime Minister. Where did it all go wrong, and will you be considering your position?
Hasn't that just been the narrative of some people last week that, you know, Rishi losing 1,000 seats was the best thing that he could have done? You get this all the time. And my response to it, and I think it's really important that we just see this through, is year on year, we knew when we took over as leader of this party, that we had a job and a half to do to get ourselves out from the worst election result since 1935 and to put Labour back where it needs to be, which is back in power. And it wasn't just that this is the thing, these election results were good for us because we won in the right place. But last year's results were good, and the year before were good. We've made progress year on year. This is a trajectory. But it is important, and it's very important for this audience to understand, we've got to kick on. We cannot, for a minute, accept that where we've got to now is enough, and that we now flatline into the election. The toughest part is next. The next year, 18 months, however long it may be, is going to be just as tough as the last 2 or 3 years, but we've got to kick on. Yeah. We've got to kick on.
And what's interesting is just seeing that narrative, you know, over the last week or so, what that gives us a strong hint at is that, as you say, for you and your team, the hard work is going to begin, but the attacks are going to get ever more ferocious from the opposition, from a coalition of people in opposition from certain sections of the press. Are you ready for kind of how dirty and how nasty it's probably going to get?
Yeah, look, I've always known that it's going to get dirty and nasty. That is the nature, I'm afraid, of our politics. It's a bit like sailors and the weather. We can't complain. It isn't pleasant, but we have to get on with it. But we do it with a positive, you know, stride. We had to do 3 things in, you know, 5 years at most that usually the Labour Party takes about 15 years to do. You know, we've done, you know, Kinnock, Smith and Blair, or we're trying to, in one go. And that's why we had to focus on changing the party first. And we had to do that first. It wasn't just there were 3 things to do, we do them all at the same time. We had to change the party, had to expose the government as not fit to govern, ably assisted by Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. And then the third bit, which is to answer the question, if not them, then why you? And I think that these elections showed that not only are people looking at Labour again, but they're prepared to trust Labour again. That's why I say the reassurance bit is beginning to be done, never completely done, but we've now got to add to that, because what's the positive hope that now we take, and that's the next bit of the final stage of the journey, which is to add hope to reassurance. And that's why, however dirty it gets, having the opportunity to argue about hope for our country, a better future for our country, is a fantastic opportunity for all of us. So we shouldn't go into a sort of brace position just because it's going to be hard. Of course it's going to be hard, we know that. We should actually put our shoulders back. This is the bit where we get to talk about the future of the country with hope. That is a good argument that we need to take out, that I'm very, very keen for us to take out there.
Now, hope is clearly word of the day here, and you've peppered it in your speech, and I think many people in the audience will appreciate that, because I think one of the questions that I certainly get asked, I'm sure many people have had this when they're out and about, whether it's on the doorsteps or just talking to their friends, is, look, yes, we're ready for change, but how can we be sure that a change of government will deliver hope, particularly when there isn't a lot of money around? How do you answer the question that many people in this room and outside, maybe soft Liberal Democrats, soft Greens, even soft Conservatives who want to change, they say to you, look, we get the kind of message around hope, but when there isn't a lot of money, how can you really deliver hope?
Yeah, look, this is a really, really good question. We get pushed really hard on it all the time. Firstly, let me just deal with this suggestion that we've not said what we stand for. I don't know an opposition that I can remember that set out 5 missions, 5 main things we're going to achieve in government a year or 18 months before the election. We've done that. We've said we want to be a mission-driven government. We've set out what those missions are. And it is worth, just in brief form, reminding people the highest sustained growth in the G7. That is going to be really difficult. That's ambitious. That's not lacking in hope or ambition. And it needs to be translated, obviously, into living standards improving everywhere across the country. So that's big. You know, becoming a green superpower, clean power by 2030, that's really hard. Really, really hard. That doesn't lack hope or ambition. It invites a sort of sharp intake of breath. But what it carries with it is lower bills, energy security, the next generation of jobs, and our contribution to climate change. You know, and NHS Fit for the Future, we're going to do what they did in the 1945 government, which is not just make sure that the NHS is restored, which it desperately needs to be done, but also that it's fit for the next 75 years. A major project of hope, absolutely. Breaking down, the fourth one, breaking down all opportunities for young people wherever they are in the country through skills and education and training for life, a massive ambition, and of course, never forgetting security, safe streets, and that sense that people have that they can go about their business in their own environment. These are huge missions we've set out. And when people say, oh, you've not set out what you stand for, those are 5 big. If a Labour government over 5 or 10 years can achieve those, we will transform this country. So I don't buy the argument we haven't set out what we're about. We need to distill it. We need to turn it into that sharp argument for hope. Not all of it will take money. I mean, unleashing the economy is actually about a government with stability. There's plenty of investment that could be done in this country. The inhibitor is a government that isn't stable. I can't tell you how many investors have said to me, I'm not investing in your country at the moment because you've just had 4 chancellors, 4 budgets, and 5 in the last year, and 5 prime ministers in the last 13 years. They are not the conditions of stability. You haven't got a strategy, you haven't got an industrial strategy. All of these things we can address. So we need to do that. We are going to, you're absolutely right about the money. We are not going to inherit a country that's in good shape. We're going to inherit a country that's in very, very bad shape.
And another just theme of the hope message, particularly when there isn't going to be a lot of money around. There's many people that's probably watching this who are hoping that if you come in, you might do some quite big constitutional reform, and that might involve possibly looking at the voting system. I spoke with Alistair Campbell just a couple of days ago, and he even said that he was much more open now to proportional representation. Many Green voters, many Liberal Democrats are very keen on that as well. Is that something that you would consider in terms of giving hope to people, particularly young people who feel like they're locked out of the voting system?
I think it's important to be clear here. We're going to have priorities when we come into government, clear priorities. They are going to be the missions, and I'm afraid voting reform isn't one of the priorities. And I'm very conscious of the reason I've set out missions is if we are privileged enough, honoured enough to be voted into government, we've got a job and a half to do. The moment you get into government, you get pushed and pulled all over the place, and we've got to have a mission that drives us through that. So I've set out my 5 missions, and I'll be absolutely focused on them.
Right, I think we've got some time for some questions. Lady at the front. I think we might have a wee microphone coming, if you...
Thank you. Thanks. Keir, you spoke about the secure foundations that working people need, but under the Tories, Britain's broken rail network means that people in the north of England are losing out when it comes to jobs and economic opportunities. I just wanted to know how you think Labour and government will tackle the huge regional inequality we've got in this country when it comes to transport investment and increased rail connectivity and capability and capacity across our northern cities and towns. Thank you.
I mean, thanks for raising that, because our rail system in particular is completely broken after 13 years. Like everything else is broken. The NHS is broken, criminal justice is broken, the economy is broken, transport is broken. And that's why when we pose this question to people, after 13 years, do you feel any better off now than you did when the day when this government started? The answer is a resounding no. And that's in sharp contrast. If you remember, this government has, I think, just about lasted as long as the last Labour government now, maybe a couple of days more. At the end of the last Labour government, remember those conferences where you could just list, it was a long, long list of all the things that Labour had achieved. Whether you agreed with every single one didn't matter. It was a long list of achievements, real achievements that changed lives. What is the equivalent list? after 13 years. It's a list of things that's broken, I'll give you that. But what's that? I mean, this is a real challenge. You've been in power for 13 years and you can't even set down on one page of A4 what you've actually achieved. And you've busted everything, including the railways. So we've got to pick that up like we've got to pick up everything else. It is a particular problem in the northwest and the northeast because it's an inhibitor of business, an inhibitor of people getting around to work. I was in Burnley the other day, and the time it takes to get from Burnley to Manchester means it's not very easy to make that journey. There are examples like that all across the country, so we've got to rebuild it. I often have argued that HS2 should have been built from the north down, not from London up, because the obvious danger then occurs when you run out of money, but also, of course, Northern Rail across the top. I've done that journey many times, as have many people in this room. Not to do anything about that is totally disrespectful and counter to the argument that we need to raise living standards everywhere. So we need to pick that up and go with it.
Gentleman over in the second row at the back. I think if you just hold on, there's a microphone coming. Yeah, thanks.
Morning, Keir.
Morning.
Having knocked on doors in marginal councils over the local elections, it was tangible how much the enthusiasm had gone up, and I was reminded about how important our ground game was. How do you think that your message today can be transferred into reminding people why they need to come out and do that, give up their evenings, give up their weekends?
Firstly, I should thank every single person who went out in those local elections to do the work on the ground. And I mean that to everybody in this room, everybody beyond this room who worked hard for the Labour Party in those local elections. A massive, massive thank you. Because, we can change our party, we can have our message, have our policy, but if we don't have individuals on the ground to take that to the doorsteps to every person in every community, then we don't communicate what we actually have to offer. So it hugely makes a difference. And the whole operation this year, I think, and I hope everybody who was involved in it would say, it's the best operation we've run in many, many years. And that's a bit of the change in the Labour Party. We don't talk so much about it, but we've turned it inside out. We've got our staff out on the front line now, not internal, arguing about factional issues in the HQ, and that's made a massive difference. And it really matters. And sometimes it matters in a way. This one will go down in history for next year. We lost Hartlepool. We're the biggest party in Hartlepool, but we didn't get an overall majority, and we lost by 2 votes. Wow. 2 votes between being the largest party and in control, a majority in Hartlepool. So that ground operation really, really matters. I think, from this morning, it's being clear that we're carrying the message now, not just of reassurance, but of hope about the future. And, I invite everybody to be part of that as we go into conference this year, which will be our last opportunity before the election, I think, to showcase what we're about, and then into the next election whenever it comes.
Great question, thank you. Now, we're kind of running out of time, so I've just got one quick question that I want to put to Keir before we let him go. Now, just on the Conservative side of things, there's a number of quite kind of angry right-wing conferences taking place. There's one in Bournemouth today with Priti Patel and Jacob Rees-Mogg. I wondered if you had any advice for Rishi Sunak about how to deal with idiots and extremists.
Well, it is a very, this is so interesting, isn't it? Because I've always said that I think that amongst Sunak's weaknesses is that he didn't actually win a race to be leader of his party. And therefore, and the problem that gives him is he hasn't got a mandate for change. He can't put his authority on the line. That's why you don't have, Suella Braverman in your cabinet on merit. Gavin Williamson before that. You do that because you are not in control of your party. And you can see it now the moment the election results. They were all wanting to write the Rishi revival story, Now he's lost 1,000 votes. They're all at it again. And that's the problem. The Tory party has been a divided party for a very, very long time. And we forget this. It was divided, in 2015, 2016. It was divided in those Brexit fighting years. It apparently got behind the 2019 result, only to divide again. We saw the leadership race that they fought last summer, division, 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 and it's there. It is, 2 or 3 parties within one party. That sounds familiar, but we've dealt with it. I mean, we should, all of you, thank you for being an important part of this journey. We learnt that lesson. We dealt with our own party. We've now put our party in a position where we firmly face the electorate. I think the Prime Minister is struggling even to have any meaningful authority. And you'll see more of this. I think they're in Bournemouth today. You'll see them arguing and arguing because they haven't resolved their fundamental differences. They don't actually know what they are as a party. There are 2 parties there. They don't know which direction to go in. And if you haven't won the leadership and the resolve to change that, then that will continue. And I think that is amongst his biggest weaknesses.
And the final question, and that's the question I know you're all dying to know the answer to. Who do you want to win Eurovision tonight?
Look, May Muller is not only a constituent, she lives in Kentish Town. I'm actually going to go to a pub in Kentish Town to watch May with her family. So, May Muller.
Ladies and gentlemen, Keir Starmer!
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much. Thank you. You were great on radio this morning.